Hello and welcome to the daily newspaper analysis. Today we shall be discussing the newspaper of the 6th of February 2018. So coming to the first article, making health insurance work. The opinion is that the National Health Protection Scheme is disconnected from primary care. It also needs to be scaled up. So coming to the context, as obvious, it is about the National Health Protection Scheme. Now, the scheme has been introduced in the budget of 2018 and 19, and it is a flagship program of the government. It is one of the biggest healthcare schemes in the entire world. So that is the relevance of the scheme. Now, coming to some background of the National Health Protection Scheme. First and foremost, you need to know that in 2011, there was a high-level expert group which was formed on giving advice about universal health care in the country. And this group had itself advocated that there is an urgent need for ensuring universal health coverage in the country. So that is something that is important. Another thing is that in line with these recommendations, there was a Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana which the government had introduced. And under this scheme, the Yojana, Rupees 30,000 would be given to all BPL families as an insurance cover. So this is something that is important, that you need to know, that it was a sum of Rupees 30,000. Now, recently in the budget, the National Health Protection Scheme has been introduced. Now, this is also a health coverage scheme. That means this is going to provide an insurance. The insurance cover will be of an amount of 5 lakh rupees to approximately 10 crore families of 50 crore individuals. So that is something that is important. 10 crore families will on an average, if you take 5 individuals, then it makes 50 crore individuals. So that is how 50 crore individuals will be benefited from this scheme. And this scheme will be specifically for tertiary as well as secondary as well as tertiary healthcare. So that is something that is important with regards to this scheme. Some other aspects in this scheme is that this scheme will promote at the sub-center level. It will promote a health and wellness center. So that is something that is important. It has a program to set up new medical colleges. For example, it envisages that 24 district hospitals will be upgraded into medical colleges and 180 new medical colleges will be set up. Also, the scheme envisages free drugs and diagnostics at public health facilities. So definitely this is a huge program and this is going to have severe ramifications on the entire health sector in the country. So that is the importance of this scheme. Now, coming to the issues which have been discussed in this particular editorial, the first issue is that of health versus politics. Now, here you need to understand that health and politics are something that have for a long time have not gone together. Why? Because the politicians have not considered health sector as an important sector to get political mileage. So whenever they wanted to give political schemes, politically undertoned schemes, they would rather focus on the agriculture sector, they would focus on the education sector, but health was for a long time ignored. So this is something that has been reversed because this budget, the budget of 2018-19, is the last full budget of this government and it is the pre-election budget. So in this, if the health sector has got such a huge scheme, then definitely health and its importance in the political mainstream is something that is increased. So that is something that has been analyzed. Another thing is that of forward and backward linkages. Now you need to understand that the magnitude of the scheme, the NHPS, is so huge that it requires some forward as well as backward linkages. In the forward linkages, what is required is a multi-layered and multi-skilled health workforce, both at the doctor's level as well as the auxiliary staff, for example, the nurses and other technicians in the health sector. So that is something that has been underlined. Another thing which is required is some backward linkages, because here a case has been made that it is not only healthcare which is important, but rather other social determinants are also vital in ensuring complete wellness of the citizens. For example, a person has suffered an accident and he has got some disability because of that. Now, definitely healthcare will be a primary need, but also social rehabilitation, a job, all these factors will be important in the aftermath of the treatment. So these are what will comprise of backward linkages. So this is something that has been analyzed in this editorial. Other things which have been analyzed are the important concerns with regards to the health sector. Now, there are 3 basic concerns that the health industry or the health sector in the country are faced with. First is that of a huge out-of-pocket expenditure. This is definitely a primary concern because a large amount of expenditure is not funded by the government and this has to be out of pocket, which the citizen does from his own income. So that is one analysis. Another thing is that the health expenditure is increasing. So increasing expenditure is one thing. Another thing is that often the health payment leads to an induced poverty. This we had analyzed in a few articles before also, that often people who are right on the poverty line or who are just above the poverty line, what happens is that when they are faced with catastrophically high health expenditures, then these populations are vulnerable to fall below the poverty line. So that is something that is another cause of concern here. So these are the basic concerns. Now coming next is to an analysis of the need for more regulation. Now here some understanding is what is required. Now the scheme, the National Health Protection Scheme, is an insurance cover, which means that if a person falls ill, if he requires secondary or tertiary care, in that case he will get an insurance coverage of 5 lakh rupees. But you need to understand that this coverage is not limited to the public hospitals, and this includes in its ambit both public as well as private healthcare centers. So even the private sector will be included. That means that if a person is admitted in the private hospital, there also he can avail this benefit. So in this regard, what is important is that the government should ensure some regulation, especially with regards to the cost of the treatments, and some clinical guidelines for the diagnostics and treatments. This is to ensure that these private hospitals do not unnecessary, because this is also stemming from some past experience of the Rashtriya Swasthya Bima. So from here you have to analyze that these private hospitals have a tendency to inflate costs. They have a tendency to advocate undue diagnostic tests. So to curb such practices, it is important that some strict regulation is what is ensured in this regard. So that is something that has been analyzed here. Another thing which is important is regarding the implementation of the National Health Protection Scheme. Now, as per the scheme, it is supposed to be implemented either through a trust or through an insurance company. So this choice between a trust and an insurance company is going to be a state choice. So that is something that needs to be analyzed with regards to the implementation. Indeed, the implementation of the scheme is a huge challenge. So that is something that is important. Another thing is with regards to a weak primary healthcare system. Now this is something that is very, very important here. You need to understand that this scheme is only going to focus on secondary and tertiary aspect of the health treatment. And not only that, the scheme is a hugely a cost intensive scheme. That means a large number of resources will go into the National Health Protection Scheme itself. So what might happen is that the primary healthcare infrastructure in the country might get affected. Though this scheme envisages the health and wellness centers, but they are at the sub-center level. So the author is making a claim that the primary healthcare sector is going to be ignored. And the primary healthcare sector is actually that part of the health system which acts as a gatekeeper. Now, if a person comes to the primary health center and he is diagnosed early of any disease, for example, the person has some initial stages of cancer and the person is diagnosed at the primary health center itself, then what happens is that the cost for secondary and tertiary treatment decreases hugely. There is a drastic fall in the cost. So definitely the primary health sector of the in the entire health setup is a gatekeeper, and it is much vital to ensure that there is not excessive burdening on the secondary and tertiary health centers. So that is something that is important with regards to primary healthcare, and as a result of which focus should also be on the primary healthcare. And because this scheme is on secondary and tertiary, it should not lead to an erosion of this primary healthcare. So that is something that has been analyzed. Another thing is with regards to public healthcare. Now, as we have analyzed before also, that it is both the public hospital as well as private hospitals which are going to provide the care. Now here the author is making a case that the government simultaneously needs to strengthen the public healthcare system. For example, this includes the government hospitals. Now, if the conditions in the government hospitals are not going to be good, then what will happen is that after this health coverage, citizens will prefer to go to private hospitals, and this will leave the entire government health system non-competitive with regards to the private healthcare system. So this is something that needs to be avoided. Otherwise, there will be a huge vacuum of the private healthcare in the country. So this is something that needs to be looked into, and focus should be on simultaneously improving public healthcare in the country. So that is one analysis which has been given. Another thing is with regards to the financing of this scheme. Now, first and foremost, you need to understand that whenever there is a question about treatment of people who are suffering from, who require a secondary or a tertiary treatment by the hospitals, this is something that is covered Why is this covered? Because the scheme is an insurance scheme. So it is based on the insurance principle of risk pooling. This is a key word, risk pooling. Now what happens in risk pooling is that a large number of people pool their funds, and at a particular point of time, only a few people require the services. For example, amongst all the people who are pooled in their sums, only a few people will fall ill. So what happens is that it is a sort of a cross subsidization by the healthy people of the unhealthy people. So definitely the scheme in itself becomes viable. So the issue is largely about the premium which the government has to pay. So in this regard is what the financing of this scheme is important. Now for the premium, the government has set up a fund of 2,000 crore. Now this sum is being said by experts, this sum is going to fall short. Besides this sum, there is an increase in the cess from 3% to 4%. So definitely this is also going to contribute to some sum, but in this respect also the funds will be short. So a case has been drawn that a large amount of financing for this scheme has to come from the states. It is said that approximately 40% of the financing has to come from the states. So that is something that has been analyzed here. Now next is the National Health Policy of 2017. This National Health Policy had itself called for universal health coverage. Not only that, the National Health Policy had talked about raising the expenditure of the government for health. For example, for the center, it advocated that from the current 1.15% of the GDP, the health spending should increase to 2.5% of the GDP. Also for the states, this policy had advocated that states should spend approximately 8% of their budget on healthcare. However, an analysis has been drawn that despite this policy recommendations, the same has not happened, neither at the center level nor at the state level. And now with this scheme, some improvement definitely will come at the central level, but at the state level, it is a major cause of concern because the states have not shown any willingness to contribute in the health sector. So that is something that has been analyzed in this editorial, and this is indeed an important analysis. Now, the last issue is that of political branding. Again, this issue of political branding is stemming from the above two issues. As we discussed, that the states need to contribute 40% to this policy, to this entire national health protection scheme. So what happens is that India is a federal country and it's a multi-party governance in this country. So what happens is that often the state governments want that if they are spending 40% of their budgets on a health scheme, then the branding of the scheme should be a co-branding one. This national health protection scheme is largely going to be known as a central scheme, which has been implemented by the now ruling NDA government. So a particular state where the Congress party is in rule, or for that matter any other opposition party is in rule, in that state, the state will want that its name should be given to the scheme. So that is one issue of political branding. So that is something that has been analyzed. Another thing which is very important in this issue of political branding is the concept of cooperative federalism. This scheme will be a test of the cooperative federalism in the country, because both state as well as the center will have to collectively participate to ensure that this scheme becomes a success. Not only that, what is also necessary is that the scheme ensures a portability of the coverage, as people often tend to cross borders in this country. That is, within the country, people travel from one state to another, so there should be some portability. So in this regard, again, cooperative federalism is important. So this entire program, this entire scheme is a vital example even for cooperative federalism. So that is the analysis here. Indeed, this scheme, the entire issue of health coverage and health as such is very, very important for this year. So that is the relevance of this article. Coming to the next article, quoting the rankings. Now, the context here is that of an issue of poor enforcement of contracts in India. This here, the author has said, is a major problem in ease of doing business in the country. So that is what is the context. Now, coming to some background. First and foremost, you need to know something about the ease of doing business index. This is an annual index which is released by the World Bank. And recently, in the most recent of this index, India has scored a rank of 100, and this is an improvement of 30 ranks which India has made. So definitely this is a good step. It is based on some 10 categories, and these 10 categories include, like, for example, I'll just enumerate them, like starting a business, dealing with construction permits, getting electricity connections, registering property, getting credit, protecting minority investors, paying taxes and trading across borders, enforcing contracts and resolving insolvency. So definitely one of those parameters that which is analyzed in the ease of doing business is indeed that of enforcement of contracts. So this is something that you need to understand. Now, to ensure better enforcement of contracts, the government had introduced the Commercial Courts, Commercial Division, Commercial Appellate Division of High Courts Act of 2015. This is something that is very important. This act is indeed important for you. Now, what is the provisions of this act. We shall be discussing a little in brief about that. Now, as the name suggests, there are three sections in this act. One is that of commercial courts. Now, as per this act, some commercial courts are to be set up in every district, and they shall be dealing specifically with commercial issues. So that is one thing. Another thing is that there is going to be a commercial division within the High Court itself. This division will be having an original jurisdiction on cases where the money involved is more than 1 crore rupees. So in those cases, the cases will not go to these commercial courts, but would rather come to this commercial division of the High Court. So that is something important. Another thing is that the High Court will have a 2-judge bench. Now, this commercial division was supposed to have a 1-judge bench. The commercial appellate division in the High Court is going to have a 2-judge bench. This is the appellate division, and all appeals from commercial courts as well as from commercial division courts of the High Court will come to this appellate division. So that is something that is important with regards to this act. Now, as obvious, this is to separate the commercial issues from normal proceedings in the court, and this is to speed up the process. It has advocated some time limits that the entire matter should be resolved within 6 months. Also, there are some detailed time limits as in time for filing of the case. So these kind of things have been analyzed in this particular act. So this is the relevance of this act. Another thing which is important here is that this act also mandates for the High Courts to show the level of cases disposed on their websites. So definitely there is a scope for increased transparency. So that is something that is important in this regard. So now coming finally to the issues which have been discussed with regards to a delay in enforcement of contracts. First and foremost, there has been given a ranking. Now you need to know that there is not only an ease of doing business index ranking, also based on these 10 parameters which this index discusses, there is a separate ranking. So on that ranking, India has scored very low. India has scored 164th rank out of 190 countries. So this is definitely a cause of concern. Another thing which has been revealed by this index is that there is a time delay in resolving these disputes, commercial disputes, and this time delay is approximately 4 years, more than 4 years in the country. So definitely this is something that is very unwelcoming in the country. Also, there is an issue of distance to frontier ranking. Now, the distance to frontier ranking of India is 40.76. Now, you need to understand that what is this distance to frontier ranking? It is the distance of an economy from the frontier. The frontier is the best ranking. Suppose 100 is the best score, and the distance which India has from this ranking is the distance to frontier ranking. So at present, India is at 40.76. The lower is the ranking here, the greater is the distance. So definitely India has not done well on this index. So that is something that you need to know. Another thing which has been analyzed is the cost to litigant. Here this report has said that in India, the litigant who is filing a case for a commercial dispute has to spend approximately 31% of his entire claim, which means that if a person has a claim of suppose 100 rupees, this is just for your understanding, then 31 rupees he will spend out of this 100 rupees in fighting this case. So definitely this is a major cause of concern. It is an unwelcome precedence again. Another thing is with regards to the implementation of the provisions of this act. Now this is one of the biggest criticism to this act. The issue is that the implementation has been left up to states. And the author here is analyzing that wherever implementation aspect is left up to the states, there is an issue of poor implementation. So that is something that is important here. And this needs to be reversed. The infrastructure and everything needs to be provided by the states. So either the center should do it, or if the center is not doing it, then the center should ensure that some monitoring is done. So that is something that is important. Another aspect which is important is with regards to the infrastructure and the manpower issues. Now here you need to know that, as I mentioned, this act has set up a time limit. Now, these time limits are not something that is new to this act. Time and again, to reform judiciary and speed up procedures, time limits are being set up. But here a case needs to be made that judges are also human beings and they need some support for ensuring speedy justice. And this support can be provided if they have an adequate infrastructure, they have some adequate manpower. Both of these are constrained, and if these are constrained and not redressed, then this speedy trial is something that cannot be achieved. So that is something that has been analyzed, and this is something that is vital for you to know. Another thing is that of a district judge who is already very overburdened. Now, as I mentioned, the commercial courts will be set up at the district level, and at present it is being envisaged under this act that the district judge will also see the commercial courts. Now here the issue is being raised that the district judges are already very overburdened. So if they are to look after the commercial courts also, then the entire purpose is defeated, because then the speedy justice cannot be ensured. So what is being advocated is that a separate court should be set up and a different judge should be there who will exclusively deal with these commercial courts. So that is something that is being advocated here. Another thing which has been analyzed is with regards to special expertise and experience which is required to deal with commercial issues in the country. Now here it is being said that just by the virtue of a judge being a district judge, he does not qualify to deal into commercial matters. So some special expertise and experience is required, and this should be provided through special training to specific judges. So that is something that has been advocated and analyzed here. Another thing which I have added here is the idea of court managers. Now this is something that is very important. This was an idea that has been mooted by the Supreme Court itself. The idea here is that every court should have some separate cadre of court managers to ensure that the administration of the court is faster, and this will act as an aid in ensuring efficient justice delivery and speedy justice delivery. So this is something that you need to know about. So the final opinion which the author has given is that without institutionalizing these improvements, we cannot hope to make our commercial courts business-like and our ranking in enforcing contracts any better. So definitely that is a vital opinion which is important. This entire issue is very, very important. This is in line with the Make in India program of the government in ensuring efficient Make in India, making Indian economy more competitive, ensuring greater manufacturing in the country. It is of utmost importance that these roadblocks from ease of doing business are done away with. So that is something that is important. Now coming to the next article, the anatomy of another riot. Now basically, in this article, it is largely a political article, so that is it's not of much relevant, but definitely the context is what is important. The Kassanj violence is something, this case about you should know what has happened in this case, and you should use it as a valid example wherever opportunity is provided. So first and foremost, you need to know about Kassanj. Kassanj is a district which is approximately 200 kilometers away from Delhi. It is a district in Uttar Pradesh, and there has been communal violence in this district. Now coming to the background as to what had happened. Now it was on the 26th of January that the workers of Akhil Bharatiya Vidyarthi Parishad, this is a students organization and it is affiliated to the RSS as well as the Vishwa Hindu Parishad. This organization, the ABVP, took out a Tiranga Yatra, and you should know that this Tiranga Yatra was carried out without the permission of the administration. Now this yatra was supposed to pass through an area which was Badu Nagar, and this area was largely a Muslim community area where people were getting ready to hoist the tricolor as part of the Republic Day celebrations. So some conflict happened between these two groups here, because it is said that the ABVP students asked the Muslim community to sing Vande Mataram. So these kind of claims are being made. So that is the entire issue, that there was a conflict. And in this conflict, what happened is that one Hindu person named Mr. Chandan Gupta, he was 22 years old, he died of injuries. Another Muslim person, that is Akram Siddiqui, he was thrashed by the mob and he has lost sight in his right eye. Also, there is a case of provocative speeches which have been given by the local MPs with regards to this entire context. So that is something that you need to know. This is the entire background of what has happened. Now the issues which are important and which have been analyzed in this editorial are, first and foremost, there is an issue of compensation. Now here the author is making a claim that the person who has lost his life, Chandan Gupta, indeed it is unfortunate that he has lost his life, but there is a communal element associated to it, and what happens is that whenever there is a death in these communal rights, there is a huge demand for compensation. So this is something that is an unwelcome practice, and this is something that needs to be discouraged. Indeed, the government needs to provide some welfarist approach towards this person and his family, but this should not be politicized. This issue of compensation should not be politicized. So that is something that has been analyzed here. Another thing which is important is an issue of patriotism. Now you need to understand that this issue of patriotism is something that is impacting the entire national integrity. Recently also we had seen that even in the Padmavat case, there are some people who are claiming patriotism as what they advocate, and this is something that cannot be accepted in a free and secular country like India. So definitely this is another example in that regard, that issue of patriotism is something that the constitution lays down, and citizens have no right to advocate their ideas of patriotism on others. So that is something that is important. Another thing is that, which has been analyzed, is that these riots are leading to a large amount of displacement. The editorial makes a claim that after dams, riots are the second major cause for displacement of people. So this is definitely something that is unwelcome. It is going to lead to a lot of internal security problems in the country. So that is something that has been analyzed. Another thing is that it is creating an ecology of threat and violence in the country, and this is something that is indeed unwelcome. It makes the entire society brittle. Another thing is that the author has used another keyword where he says that there is a geography of anxiety that minorities feel difficult to cope up with. So definitely this is the scenario, and this is an unwelcome thing. Now this is another important analysis which the author has given. Now here he says that time and again we are seeing communal violence rising in the country. In this respect, if citizens are feeling dissatisfied with the fact that the government is not doing much, or there is political patronage to such kind of communal violence, then it is ripe time that the civil society in the country rises to this occasion and it takes action against such kind of miscreants in the society. This is something that is not happening, and indeed this is a cause of concern. So the step back by the civil society in the present times is definitely an issue, and this is something that is important. So these are the vital issues. The article is largely to be used as an example only. Political aspect of this article needs to be ignored for your UPSC point of view. So coming to the next article, for more equity. Now the context here is with regards to the long-term capital gains tax, which has been reintroduced in the budget of 2018 and 19. As per this, a 10% tax will be levied on gains over rupees 1 lakh. I'll just write down a 10% tax on gains over rupees 1 lakh made on any form of investment in the listed equities and mutual funds with a holding period of more than 1 year. So these are the some facts that you need to know with regards to the long-term capital gains tax. Now coming to some background of this tax. Now you need to know that this tax existed previously also, but in the year 2004 and 5, it was seen by the government that because of this tax, the investments, long-term investments in the equity markets was not happening. So to discourage this trend, the government had done away with this particular tax, and instead it introduced another form of tax, which was the securities transaction tax. So that is something that is important in the background aspect, and now the government has reintroduced this tax. So definitely it is in this regard that some objections are being laid. So that is something that is important. Now coming to the issues which have been analyzed in the editorial, the first issue is with regards to a level playing field. Now the government in its defense has said that it has introduced this tax to ensure that there is no erosion of the tax base, and also there is a level playing field between the financial assets and investments in manufacturing. So definitely the government's intention has been that if people have money to invest, that they should invest this money also in the manufacturing sector, which requires, because private investment in the country is at all-time low. So in that respect, the government has given a case that it needs to discourage some amount of investment in the equity market, which is the hot money, and rather wants that some investment should be done in the manufacturing sector. So that is something that the government has said in its defense for this tax. Now, in this regard, an issue has been raised that what is the right step for the government to encourage more money being invested in manufacturing sector. Either the government should raise tax on equities as it has done in this case, or another way would have been that the government should have lowered the taxes and other barriers to invest in alternative assets. So definitely it is said that this would have been a better approach by the government. It would have increased ease of doing business. So some sections believe, but obviously there is also a concern that the government is facing fiscal deficit, and in this regard the government, it would have been not very wise for the government to lower tax rates. So definitely that can be debated. So this is one issue which has been raised. Another thing is with regards to discouraging long-term investments. Now, as I mentioned in the background, previously also this tax was done away with because of this reason, that it led to a discouragement for long-term investments, and there is a fear that a similar scenario can be repeated. So that is something that is important. Another issue which is vital is that of double taxation. Now here you need to understand that the long-term capital gain tax has been introduced. However, the securities transaction tax, which was introduced in the backdrop of the removal of LTCG, has not been done away with. So as a result of which, the situation now is that both the long-term capital gains tax exists as well as the security transaction tax is existing. So this is leading to a double taxation. So that is something that is important. Now the next analysis is with regards to foreign investors. Now here you need to understand that the foreign investors have a freedom to choose between different countries, and in this respect India should ensure that it is a profitable destination for foreign investors. What happens is that if there is double taxation and there is less profit for foreign investors, then there is a fear that foreign investors will not choose India as a choice for investing in the equity markets, and this could this could destabilize the entire economy. So that is something that has been analyzed here, and this is something that is important. Another thing which is vital is that of capital gains accruing from zero effort. Now this is a defense which the government has given. The government has said that these capital gains that is being received on equity investments are from zero effort. There is no effort which the person is doing, and this is largely because of the market sentiment that these gains are happening. And in the past year, the equity markets have seen historic rise, and as a result of which a huge amount of capital gains is what these people have got. So definitely a tax was warranted. So that is something that the government is saying. Another issue is, which is important, is with regards to indexation. Now you need to understand that what we understand by indexation. Indexation means allowing a set off based on inflation rate, which means that tax will be adjusted as per the inflation rate. This is something that has not been introduced at present, and this entire editorial is advocating that to do away with the ills of the long-term capital gains tax, to make it a little more cushionable or little more tolerable for the entire investors in the equity market. The government should at least index it with inflation. So that is something that has been advocated. Another thing is with regards to India's credibility in the global markets. Now, as I have discussed before also, that the foreign investors will not be very keen to invest in India. Also, India's in the global market, the country's image is something that is important. If the government is going to continuously play with these taxes, then it impacts the credibility of the government and the credibility of the market. So that is something that has been analyzed in this particular editorial. The issue of long-term capital gains tax, I doubt it can come as a direct question, but yes, this is a development in the budget, and this you should know about, you should be aware about it. So that's important here. Coming to the next article, fearing cryptocurrencies. Now the context is, as obvious, it is about the cryptocurrencies like bitcoins. These have been introduced. Now some issues is what have been analyzed in this particular article. Now we have made previous videos on bitcoin, so if you want some details, if you want a more clearer understanding of bitcoins, please watch our previous videos. Now coming to the issues with regards to cryptocurrencies, the first issue is that there is a global protectionism against cryptocurrencies. This is not only seen recently in India. For example, the finance minister in his budget speech warned against cryptocurrencies. The RBI has issued warnings against cryptocurrency. Other countries like China and South Korea have recently taken steps to suppress the use of cryptocurrencies. Regulation is also seen in US. So there is a global sentiment which is against cryptocurrencies. That is the first analysis. Another issue is with regards to the economic power of national currencies. Now you need to understand that the national currencies are centralized currencies. They are under the control of a government, and this gives the governments a huge amount of economic power. This is something that is the major cause of discontent amongst a section of society, which even led to the birth of cryptocurrencies itself. You should know that cryptocurrencies emerged in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis. So that is something that you need to understand, that at present the governments have a huge amount of economic power, and this is because they have a centralized national currency. So this is something that is important. Another analysis is with regards of government's monopoly on the national currencies. Now it is this monopoly which is the source of this economic power. Also, it is only the government which can issue these currencies, and there is no other person, no other entity who can create or sell these currencies. So definitely there is an issue of monopoly here. Another very important analysis which has been given is with regards to politicization of currency. Now, this is something that you need to understand here. For example, a wonderful example has been given in this editorial. Now, suppose a government wants to start a populist scheme. We have discussed the National Health Protection Scheme just recently. So let us discuss that if the government wants to introduce this scheme, and for this, suppose 6,000 crore is the expenditure that is required. Now, to ensure that this expenditure is provided, what might the government do? It would either raise the taxes or it can produce new currency. So whenever it is a choice between taxes and new currencies, a populist measure could be that the government will not raise the taxes, but rather will create new currency. This creation of new currency is entirely in the government's hand. So the author here is analyzing that this tendency of the government to issue new currency can sometimes be adversely impacting the economy, because what can happen is that this new currency could be issued irresponsibly, and this could lead to inflation, and in the long term this could impact citizens' interest. Whereas if the government would have raised taxes, it would have been in the economic interest, but it could have been against the party in power. So that is something that is important. For example, even recently in India's case, you need to understand that the fiscal deficit of the government is high, and the government has been continuously pushing the margins of ensuring fiscal discipline. The rate of 3% of fiscal deficit has been time and again been postponed by the government. So then, indeed, this is a populist measure. This is impacting the markets. It is impacting the bond market. It is impacting inflation in the country. So this monopoly of the government is something that is not liked by investors at times, and in this respect, the cryptocurrencies are gaining popularity, and this is being viewed by governments as a threat to their power. So that is the core and crux of this particular editorial. Another thing is that an opportunity of choice. If cryptocurrencies are made more popular, then this will provide choice to the citizens. For example, some citizens might choose not to invest in the rupee, and they might choose a cryptocurrency. They might choose cryptocurrency as a medium of exchange in a separate marketplace. So all of this will ensure greater choice to the citizens. So that is something that is important. Another analysis which has been drawn is with regards to stability and predictability. Now, in any currency, it is stability and predictability that is the most sought after quality, and it is for this reason that at present majority of the currencies are under the government and they are centralized. If these two virtues, that is stability and predictability, is provided by cryptocurrencies, then a case is being made that cryptocurrencies will completely overhaul the situation, and the majority of the currencies which will be used will then become cryptocurrencies because they are decentralized and they have greater choice. So what is needed for cryptocurrencies is stability and predictability. However, in this respect, is what is analyzed is the volatility which cryptocurrencies face. You should know, even with bitcoins, there is a huge amount of volatility in the price of the bitcoins. So that is something that is a major worry in cryptocurrencies. But here again, the author has given an analysis where he says that this extreme volatility in cryptocurrencies at present is largely because currently they are only accepted as a speculative asset, and they are not being viewed as a medium of exchange. But whenever the citizens are ready, whenever people are ready to use cryptocurrencies as a medium of exchange, at that time this problem of volatility will automatically be done away with. So that is what has been analyzed. Indeed, cryptocurrencies are very, very important, and these analysis is what UPSC will be seeking from you. So definitely this article is important. Now with this, we finish today's discussion. So please try and attempt these questions. I'm sure you will be able to attempt them based on our discussion today. So with this, we finish today's discussion. I thank you all for watching today's video, and I hope to see you tomorrow.